Hello, everyone. So welcome back. It's not easy. We got 4 nights of parties. I'm so proud of you that you can get up this morning. Now, first of all, I just want to tell you, I'm just so excited. I've been looking forward to this day to have a chat with Sergey in front of the Hong Kong audience. So again, Sergey, thanks a lot for making it. We really appreciate it. Now, in fact,
my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you've been such a great host. You've been such a great host for us in Barcelona. So I just want to make sure that all the great messages that you have shared with the audience in Europe and I guess a lot of international guests can be heard by our Hong Kong audience. This is really transformative. Now, perhaps without further ado, I just want to start off with this very exciting initiative of yours, the CCIP, the Cross-Chain Interoperability Protocol. This is supposed to break down the digital islands, which is a huge problem in the blockchain space. So can you help the audience what that is, and also why are so many banks and major players are getting so excited?
Sure. So there's 3 fundamental problems when it comes to blockchain connectivity. The first problem that CCIP solves is the ability to connect existing bank systems to multiple blockchains with one integration, using existing standards like Swift messages to communicate with blockchains in an efficient way from existing infrastructure. So the problem that banks have historically had is that they have a big investment in infrastructure and they don't have an ability to get rid of that infrastructure. And so the history of bank infrastructure is kind of wrapping more and more layers on top of existing systems. And this is the same thing that'll happen for the blockchain industry. It'll be the wrapping of another layer, basically a reliable interface for banks to interact with thousands of blockchains through one integration. The benefit this has for banks is getting them onto chains. And then the benefit it has to the capital markets and the Web3 world is that there will be more banks and asset managers on chains. The second part of the problem is cross-chain connectivity. So once banks are connected to chains or once banks are on their own chain, if they issue assets, and even if they don't issue assets, they will want to access other people's assets, or they will want people to come to their chain to purchase the assets that they created. And this will necessitate connectivity between those various chains. What CCIP does here, in addition to solving the first problem as a kind of an enterprise-grade abstraction layer, what it does for the second problem is it acts as a TCP/IP-like protocol. So TCP/IP is what connected all the different early internet technologies, networking technologies, data transfer technologies, local area network things into the single internet. So the single internet that we're all on is formed by TCP/IP as a standard to connect various technologies into a single internet. That's what CCIP does for all the different blockchain technologies, such that a bank A can use one chain, bank B a third chain, custodian C a fourth chain, and whatever other chain. And then the final problem is actually the ability to use smart contracts programmatically in other places by triggering transactions where you already are. And for this, CCIP has something called programmable token transfers, where you can actually send the value together with the instructions. And this can basically make everything work on T+0 or atomic settlement speeds, because the value arrives with instructions that execute the transaction on behalf of the value and can even return the result of the transaction back to the chain from which the value originated, which is really leveraging the programmatic advanced automation capabilities of blockchains and smart contracts. So that's at a high level, 3 of the main problems that CCIP solves for the capital markets. And the goal of it is to connect all the chains into a kind of global internet of contracts with those features. But I'm also very interested to hear how you see interoperability and it fitting into the Hong Kong digital asset strategy, King.
Well, I'm glad you asked this question too. Now, obviously, this is so exciting that it got us to go to Barcelona in the first place, to meet you in person. Now, the reason why we are so excited to learn more about this and how we can apply this to Hong Kong is that, again, the Hong Kong IFC status has been built over decades. But one of the building blocks of that is about the free flow of capital, right? That makes Hong Kong such an attractive place for investors. So in a way, I mean, it's not hard to envision that in the future where the underlying infrastructure is about blockchain, then I think we cannot afford to have digital islands where this is in a way impeding the liquidity. So that's why for us, just intellectually, it's so important to have some kind of infrastructure to help us to bridge all the blockchains to basically maximize the amount of liquidity of whether that be secure tokens, the RWAs, whatever that is. So we need maximum liquidity. So this is why we feel that what you're doing is actually contributing a lot to the entire industry. Now, so perhaps I guess I want to ask you so many questions. Maybe I'll just follow up with another really exciting thing that you guys have been working on. Now, I believe it's sometime in June, there's another massive news appearing in a lot of media, and that is the partnership between you and also Swift. And people is like, wow, that's huge. So now, so tell me more about it, and also share the audience. So what exactly are you trying to achieve with the Swift partnership?
Sure. So our work with Swift has been going on for many years, and it came to fruition in that second proof of concept that we put out together with them and a number of large CSDs and a number of large banks and asset managers. And what it basically proved was the first feature that I mentioned earlier. Basically, the ability to use Swift messages to execute blockchain transactions, because CCIP can ingest Swift messages, interpret them, and execute blockchain events on behalf of the bank or the asset manager that signed and sent the Swift message, basically resulting in the existing infrastructure, the existing signing capabilities of Swift, the existing messaging standards, the existing definitional standards being used in a very efficient way from existing backend infrastructure, but then CCIP allows those standards to be translated into blockchain events on various chains. And we were able to show that you can actually use existing standards like Swift to basically trigger transactions across private chains, and from private chains into public chains, and for information from private and public chains to flow back into bank and asset management systems using Swift messages to inform those systems. So the work with Swift, multiple banks, multiple large asset managers, multiple CSDs, basically showed that existing infrastructure, widely used existing standards, like Swift, which is a very widely used standard for defining these transactions, is able to be applied efficiently to blockchains and also to receive information back from blockchains, so that existing systems can not only trigger events, but they can remain informed about the status of all the transactions and all the assets and all the kind of risks and all the blockchain related events back into their systems, which is in a certain way an equally important part of the process, because it's a requirement for banks and asset managers to interact with blockchains. So the work with Swift has been something we've been working towards for many years. We hope it'll continue and create even more connectivity for people. And I think it's great that there's ways to use existing infrastructure and existing standards that have been made over 50 years by great organizations like Swift to accelerate the use and adoption of blockchain technology. And that's really our goal, is to accelerate the usefulness and adoption of blockchain technology, whether it's in Web3, in the public chain world, or in the private chain world, and to eventually actually connect those two worlds into a single global internet of contracts.
Yeah, I think this is so important. I think particularly for our guests in the Hong Kong audience who may not be as familiar with Chainlink. Essentially, Chainlink is the oracle that connects the Web3 players to the Web2 world, so to speak. And essentially, something like over 80% of the traffic go through you guys. So this is a very important service that Sergey's team has been providing to the Web3 world. Now, I guess another thing I want to touch on, Sergey, is that obviously we talk about some technical lingo that may not be as something that I think the commercial or business folks may feel or appreciate as much. But then you guys have also done some amazing use cases. I remember there was this gentleman on the stage at your conference. He's from ANZ Bank. So the gentleman talked about the tokenized asset, the stable coins that they issued that previously was stuck in their own chain without much liquidity. So that's the same kind of challenge that we have seen in Hong Kong. But I think using your CCIP, that platform, now he's able to cross-chain to see more liquidity. Now, so can you, again, I know that much just from listening to him. Can you share with the audience about what exactly that accomplished?
Sure, absolutely. That is an example of the second key feature and also the third key feature of CCIP that I described earlier. So it is important for banks, anybody creating real-world assets, frankly, anybody involved in the business of creating financial products and assets onto their own chain, to have access to other chains. Because the world has really, in the capital markets part of the blockchain industry, shifted from everyone is going to go on to your chain to everyone is going to have their own chain. That's kind of the shift. There was a period of time a few years ago where everyone was convinced that if they launched a chain, everyone would join their chain, and that's how they would interact with them as a counterparty. I think that after a few banks and large other folks launched chains in the capital markets, there was a realization that they couldn't get anyone to join, that no one wanted to join their chain. Everyone wanted to make their own chain. And so there was then this realization that if everyone makes their own chain, and if we have our own chain, then how do we transact? How do we interact with that counterparty? And so this was the first fundamental problem that was solved here for ANZ. It was the ability to take their stablecoin that they created and send it over to another chain for that chain to then receive that stablecoin and be able to use it in a transaction for something called a reef credit. It's a nature-based asset similar to a carbon credit. So it's basically a real-world asset. So the first fundamental value was there's a bank with its own chain. It has a stablecoin. It has a user that wants to buy a real-world asset on another chain. How can we efficiently and securely allow, and in a compliant way, allow that value to move to the other chain to engage in that transaction and purchase that real-world asset? And they've done a great job, and I think they're very cutting edge, and they're kind of pushing the limits of what's possible, not in this way, but in not only in this way, but in many other ways. So that was the first kind of thing that was done there. The second thing that was done was the final feature that I explained a few minutes ago, which was the ability to attach instructions to the token. So the ability to send the token with instructions about what the token will do is actually a very powerful feature, because what it basically does is it means that when the value, the stablecoin value or whatever the value is, arrives at its destination, it can programmatically affect the outcome. So you can basically turn everything into atomic settlement T+0 very efficiently, because now you can attach instructions to the value, and because the instructions and the value are kind of reaching a programmatic smart contract type of system on the other end, they can actually execute your intent. And then they can return back to you, or they can continue to manage the asset or the financial system or the product on the other chain. And so this was the second thing that happened in the ANZ work with them, is that we explored this and we worked through how to do that. Not only how to just send the asset, but how to make it so that the real world asset can then return back onto the original chain. And what this does is it allows actually everyone to have a very efficient user experience where asset managers, banks, various other groups can stay in their own chain, in their own interface, and from that interface use the other chains without having to have a wallet or an address or to natively integrate with those chains. And this is very, very valuable, because it allows them to interact with huge amounts of chains without the integration burden of having to connect directly to them or integrate with them. And so the ANZ work, I think, was quite cutting edge, and I think that that's something that we're very excited to continue.
Well, I don't know about you folks. When I heard it, it was just so, I was like, wow, somebody actually did it. And again, I'm sure there's some information shared by Sergey. They might feel a bit new. That is not something you've been hearing from the mainstream media, local conferences, and so on. And this is exactly why we invited someone like Sergey, who's a visionary, to share literally the cutting edge. This is so fresh within the past few months. So this is exciting. Now, I guess the other thing I want to, Sergey, you to help the audience to understand better is that you're not just operating in the international market. You're also now working with a Hong Kong team. that is Arta. Yesterday we did a small session to showcase what Arta and Chainlink have collaborated on. So that's another aspect that we'd like to get your views and then share the audience about what you're trying to achieve there in that collaboration.
Yeah, so I think Arta is a great firm that we've been now working with and now have announced that we're working with them. Eddie, who is basically the main principal running the firm, is a great guy and a really great representative, I think, for Hong Kong and the capital markets industry generally. I think what we're trying to solve for them is very similar to the things that I have described. And I think I see a number of well-capitalized, technically advanced players like Arta that want to create real-world assets, want to create various advanced financial products, which I'll let them announce and talk about in their own way. But then the fundamental problem that they will have is the problem of getting data into those financial products, getting identity information in those financial products so that they can be moved across chains. And then once the financial products, the RWAs, all the things that can be created there, reach kind of a certain level of enrichment with data and identity and other things, to then have them moved to the other chains and to have them connected. Because the fundamental kind of reality of all these real world assets, including for Arta, including for the other folks we discussed, is that they need to have access to counterparties. So really the first stage of the process with someone like Arta or ANZ or others is to make a good asset and to enrich that asset with high quality data about the asset status, about identity data to allow it to comply with AML KYC so it can be properly moved to other counterparties, and about various other pieces of data that might be needed, like NAV to mark to market to make sure you know the valuation on a daily basis. And then once the asset is created, you now have the problem of moving it and sending it to the other counterparties, and so you need to connect to them. And then the final problem is once you move it to them, it needs to stay updated. And I think Arta has a very good grasp of all these problems. And I think they and a few other players that are well capitalized and willing to make a technical investment in making advanced financial products will begin to launch some of the more advanced, cooler things that will show people what's possible in the capital markets. And that I think will also be attractive to the Web3 markets as well.
Yeah, well, that's another transformative project that I would encourage you to follow. Because essentially what that project that Sergey talks about, essentially will have that e-Hong Kong dollar elements, in which Arta is one of the, I think, 16 firms selected to participate in the HKMA e-Hong Kong dollar pilots. So that is the payment aspect. And then translating onto investments, it can be tokenization of anything. It can be money market funds or other things. But then you also need that sort of the breakage of the digital islands, the cross-chain operability, interoperability, the proof of reserves, and all the things that are the technological breakthroughs that Chainlink has been working very hard on. Now, I guess we are running short of time, so again, I just want to also come back to you. Again, you've been traveling so much, and you spend something like 4 or 6 weeks traveling around Asia this year, including Hong Kong. So perhaps can you say a few words about what's your experience like when you have been traveling across Hong Kong? Not Hong Kong, but Asia in general.
Yeah, so it was a very positive experience. I'm very impressed by kind of the forward-looking nature of the policies and the encouragement from various central banks and regulators about the creation of various digital assets and the clarity that's being created by those frameworks, and the encouragement not only to banks and large capital market players, but also to smaller and medium-sized players. And I think that like with various stablecoin frameworks and other frameworks that I know you folks in Hong Kong are working on, I was particularly impressed of how aligned everyone in Hong Kong was across the legislature, across the regulatory body, across the central bank, across a number of different places, because I do think that there is a kind of need or a sentiment that Hong Kong needs to remain a key financial center as it is today, and that blockchains are an important part of that future. And I felt that understanding throughout the many different groups and departments that I met with. And beyond that, I also saw a lot of actual practical outcomes and collaborations about frameworks that can make firms able to actually create assets that can legally then be transacted. And I think in addition to privacy And basically privacy, connectivity, and scalability are the main technical challenges. I think this legal challenge is the final hurdle that needs to be resolved by various, organizational, governmental, other bodies. And once it's resolved, I think the massive amount of value that's ready to be transacted is really the greatest absolute dollar amount that will ever be transacted or has ever been transacted so far. Because there's just so much of the value that wants to flow into this format. And I think that in Asia, I saw that that value is really being enabled to flow into the blockchain format and the digital asset format in a very concerted, thoughtful way, and especially in Hong Kong, which I was very impressed by.
That's great. Well, I see that our time has come. And again, I wish that we can talk longer. The one last message I'd like to share with the audience is that because I guess given the work that I do for Invest Hong Kong, I got the privilege to travel around the world, attend a lot of conferences. I have to say, it's very rare that I've seen that a speaker that would get a standing ovation in our industry. But then when I was in Barcelona in Sergey's conference, I mean, numerous times when Sergey makes some announcements or sharing the breakthrough technologies that his team has delivered to the community, I'm serious. There were like people just standing up, just clapping, and just like so emotional, sometimes like tears in the eyes. It's like, I have rarely seen that. So with that, I think it's a great treat to have someone, the visionary, the co-founder of Chainlink Labs, Sergey Nazarov, with us to share with us these amazingly transformative developments in our industry. So with that, let's give a big hand to Sergey again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure to come this year, and I'll definitely be back in Hong Kong sometime soon. Really looking forward to seeing many of you again. Thank you for having me at the conference.
Great.
Have a good rest of your conference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, and let's hear it for King Leung. Thank you very much for making this happen. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for King.